Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I will be talking about my journey about next level e-commerce. So let me start with a little introduction. My name is Voncken, but you can call me Mr. Lewis. I'm the lead innovation at Experius, which is part of Happy Horizon. I originally started as an intern more than 9 years ago. Last year I even cycled to Berlin for a charity. And this year I'm going to cycle to Paris, so I'm the cycling developer. So enough about me. Let's deep dive in the road to next level e-commerce. Let's take a moment to acknowledge how it all started. A couple of years ago, in another galaxy, we saw that the future was changing. The old school Magento frontend is not what the future wants. As soon as we acknowledged that, we started working with PWA Studio, which is a starter kit which you can use to build React web apps. The kit was provided by Magento, but as soon as we started working with it, we realized it wasn't production ready. It was missing several features. Some main features, I must say. I was missing obvious ones like server-side rendering, performance was unstable. A PWA should be freaking fast, right? To go live with PWA Studio-based applications, we had to do some hacky stuff because the page couldn't be rendered by SEO bots, which means your SEO ranking will be going down. That's not what you want. So what we did, we made a hacky solution with Rendertron. So therein comes called SEO Snap, which is a solution that actually renders your page through Rendertron. So a headless Chrome application was pinned up, so the whole HTML could be rendered and then returned to the engine bot. But that's not very ideal. So at the end of 2021, I came with the idea about maybe we should use something that is production ready. So therein you have to make choices between Next.js and Nuxt, which are frameworks that are production ready. The one is built on Vue, the other built on React. As I said before, we were based on React applications. But on the other hand, the learning curve of Vue seems to be a bit lower because it's easier to adapt. Also, the other difference between those two is that Next is obviously always ahead compared to Nuxt. If you take a look at React 18, you could say that Next 13 is actually the stable React 18 implementation. So if we take that all into consideration, we have chosen to use Next.js because we're already invested in React. So now the choice is made. So I had to make a proof of concept with the following requirements. It has to be a simple tech stack. The performance is key, and we wanted multiple e-commerce platforms. If you take a look at the simple tech stack, the challenge is to make it simple is not really that simple. So that was a bit of a challenge, which I will discuss later on. So the move from Magento to e-commerce. The reason we wanted multiple e-commerce platforms is because we were vendor locked to Magento, which now is Adobe Commerce. Yeah, one of the reasons that we wanted to move from Magento to e-commerce is because the fact that Adobe acquired Magento, but also that we consider that there are other options which fit better with the merchant. And that's why we made the move from Magento to e-commerce. So a requirement was the possibility to integrate multiple platforms like Shopware, BigCommerce, Shopify. But for me, the main requirement is ADA. And the key point for me is because I think this is the biggest factor. Some people now think, oh, is that the Amsterdam dance event? Well, you're wrong. It's the amazing developer experience. I'm a developer myself, so I want to be on top of the best experience. Because a happy developer is a legendary coder. With every step I took, I keep all these requirements in mind. So, well, now you know why. So let's have a look how we did it. It started with a proof of concept, and we came to the future, which is now. So in December of 2021, started from scratch, creating a proof of concept. I started with literally a blank screen. So I'm going to show you the actual proof of concept built within December of 2021 later, because if you see it right now, you probably think, whoa, where is this going? After starting from scratch, the real challenge started. The challenge is keeping it simple. And I can tell you, keeping it simple is not that simple indeed. So I tried to use the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. The definition simple started with the fact that we have two types of developers here, backend developers and front-end developers. Some people would say that I'm a full stack developer, but my passion lays in between backend and front-end. So I don't want to do the most epic backend features. I don't want to do pixel perfect styling. So what does that mean? During the setup, I created a monorepo in which I divided in different parts of development. So you had a split between front end and back end. So because of that fact that we have to maintain multiple packages, we set up a monorepo. The split between the packages is a Next.js application, which can be multiple. In the example on the right-hand side, you see BigCommerce, Akinio, Magento, and Shopware. So you can integrate multiple websites within the same repository. Besides that, we have a UI library, which is kind of like a blank theme. Besides that, we have commerce packages. Commerce packages are divided in three different ones. One is the data provider layer, which is a layer which communicates directly with the e-commerce platform and the storefront. So it's the key factor between the storefront and the e-commerce platform, because the UI is a generic UI library, which is independent from the e-commerce platform. Based in the types packages, there is a Typescript type definition, which tells the output of the data provider layer, which can be used within the UI. So, and the other one is the SWR. SWR is used for data fetching. With SWR components, they get a stream of the data, so they are always up to date automatically, and the UI will always be fast and reactive. The main split is the UI and theming separated from the code, which connects the storefront with the e-commerce platform. So we really have a top layer, especially for theming. We have the data provider layer, which you could say is backending. So if we take a closer look, the theming and UI is focused on the front-end development and the data layer provider for the backenders. But I soon realized that that layer wasn't especially made for our PHP backend developers. So there came in a new type of developer, which is the technical TypeScript developer. The hard part was how to identify who were these kind of developers. So a new term was created. Yeah, Midend. It's actually the developer in the middle of front end and back end. We called it Midend. I'm not totally happy with the name, but even after a year, it's still Midend here. As you can see in the diagram, we have the yellow layer, which is especially for front end, then the mid-end, which is actually technical TypeScript or JavaScript developer. Also the gray area, because yeah, it's the area that crosses a technical front-ender with a backender who likes to do some JavaScript. And then the last layer is the e-commerce platform itself. In several e-commerce platforms, you can't even put your own code in. For example, BigCommerce, which is SAAS oplossing. The last layer is the e-commerce platform, in which you can put your own code. But there are also SaaS solutions which you can't put your own code in. For example, a BigCommerce. As I mentioned, we use a monorepo, but at the end of December 2021, Vercel acquired TurboRepo. TurboRepo is just a freaking fast monorepo. So I will be referencing to a monorepo sometimes, but I'm actually using TurboRepo. So it is very fast with compiling, and eventually the developer experience goes up because it's fast development. You don't have to wait every single minute for compilation. And maybe later in the future, I'm also going to use TurboPack, but for now we're focused with a TurboRepo. So why TypeScript? Well, as I said earlier, I focus on the amazing developer experience. And TurboRepo helps with that because it's very, very fast. TypeScript enables developers to add type safety to their projects. By adding type safety, you will have validation during build time and not during runtime. Because what we saw before in our previous application built on scratch from React was that we didn't use TypeScript and we got some errors in production. Somebody was putting items in their cart and they went to the checkout and they got an error because the shipping method was unavailable based on their cart. We want to prevent those errors, so we added type definitions, which adds type safety to your projects. So if there are less bugs, the merchant is happy, the developer is happy. That's where I think it's all about. Then, not much later in February, I had a kind of setup. After the proof of concept, I created a setup which I used to pitch to one of our customers who wanted a project based on PWA Studio. I was like, whoa, you don't have to start on PWA Studio, but you have to start on Horizon Storefront. And after a few days, we had an agreement. He signed for Magento with Horizon Storefront. So I was like, okay, let's go. Because it's very strange to do a pitch with something that's not really done. Because if you take a look in the right top corner, it still says name here. So I didn't even have logged in, but the customer was convinced that this was what he needed. Then in March, there was a first kind of canary release. Which is even before beta or alpha, it's the canary release, unstable, which had focus on performance and basic shopping functionality. So you can log in, you can add products to the cart, you can go to the checkout, you can even place an order. That was where it was all about. Oh, and of course, I had to do some documentation. But the documentation is pretty minimum because I think that the code should speak for itself. But there is some documentation in which you see it was called Galaxy Horizon first. But the old black package where we were building on was called Galaxy. But some things have to stay in the past, so the name changed to Horizon Storefront. The next phase was integrating Page Builder for two different platforms, Shopware and Magento. Why Shopware? Because a second project was in the sales pipeline based on Shopware. So we gotta have Shopware support as well, because if we don't have Shopware support, why choose Shopware? So after some work, we created our first version of Page Builder, as which you can see. It only had banners, well, actually images. When in a banner, you can place text. This is only images. What this is, if you take a closer look, is that we use the same technique which was used by PWA Studio, but we changed it a little bit because we had to do it server-side. So what happens, is when you edit the CMS page in Magento, it generates an HTML. That HTML went through a HTML node parser, which was then coupled to, was then linked to the page builder React components. Because we want to leverage the React technique in the front end and not just clamp in the HTML directly from Magento, which would work, but is not what you really want, because it only has inline styling and you want to get rid of that. So we had this setup. So we can determine based on HTML which React component has to be loaded, and then you have it in your storefront. In the stage of adding page builder, there was a performance issue, because if you have components which are not used on every page, your bundle size becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So we had to use Next Dynamic. It is a composite extension of React Lazy and Suspense. So when using a Next Dynamic, we always import the page builder with Next Dynamic to make sure that your bundle size is as small as possible, and only load it for the pages where the block is used, because within page builder you can manage where the block is used yourself. Then a big gap, as you can see, from May to August, in which we signed our first shopware project and started building the full shopping functionality within the data layer provider for shopware. Another thing I did is I cycled to Berlin in 5 days and stayed there a little bit for holidays. So when I came back in August, there was some changes. Yeah, we built lots of shopware functionalities, and we had our first Innovation Friday, focused on Next.js, called Next Friday. On that day, with all the developers of the company, we start building on the core features of Horizon Storefront. It was a fantastic and inspiring day, if I may say so myself. During this day, we added more support for Page Builder with different components. For example, the video component, which first shows a thumbnail. Because of performance, you don't want to directly load the YouTube video already. So we added more components. Pretty cool, because they parse the HTML and then React components. Then the first big milestone, at least for me, it was the first big milestone. The first Horizon Storefront went live. It was the webshop Goosecraft, a webshop which sells designer clothing, our first shopware project. And not only it was shopware, it was our headless storefront that went live. We even created an app version. We used PWA Builder, in which you can create an app shell for your PWA and submit it to the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So you can reach more audience with your web shop. So pretty cool feature. And eventually we want to put more features in that are mobile first. So think like an Apple Pay or the Apple login. So more for in the future features. Then we started building parallel new features for BigCommerce, because we had to do a proof of concept for sales. Because if we say we can do it, which I always say haven't done it yet, but we can do it. But they wanted proof. So we started creating BigCommerce functionalities. So they had a green light to pitch BigCommerce in their sales projects. Then the final version, almost a year later, for Page Builder. Within this version, we didn't actually change the front end. It was just a refactor of the code. So it's more extendable. We can do better custom designs, even add custom components within your project. So it's more extensible, developer experience goes higher, and the designers here can do any component they want. Then a year later, in December last year, we had the question about hosting. Again, this question, because with our old version, we used PM2, which they say should be stable. You can keep your application up and running 24/7, but we experienced differently. It sometimes just went out, you have to reboot, you have to add additional tasks to your cron tab, but no, not very stable. So at Goosecraft didn't went live with PM2. We used Vercel as the hosting provider. But eventually, how bigger your webshop gets, how bigger the webshop gets, it's not affordable to host it there. Besides that, we explored several alternatives. One that came out was Google Cloud. So what we did is we went for App Engine to make the developer experience a little bit easier, but eventually, after some considerations, we migrated from App Engine to Cloud Run. One of the main reasons it's of course, it's less expensive, but for me, the main reason is sustainability. We all want a greener planet, and with Cloud Run, you have the option that you can scale up and down your application based on the amount of visitors. So it doesn't have to run if there are no visitors. So the architecture is sustainable setup. As I'm speaking now, we have even more projects live and many more to come in this year. Also working hard on our first big commerce project combined with Horizon Storefront. So let's see the proof of concept next to the actual Horizon Storefront that we have today. So this is a huge difference. It's not only, it has been done in only a year time. On the left side, you see the proof of concept in which it already was possible to switch between Shopware and Magento, just based on your environment file. As you can see, it doesn't look that pretty. A proof of concept doesn't have to look pretty. It just have to be a concept that works. Because if it doesn't work, if you can't make it, you can't make it. But this proves that we can. We built our setup from scratch on Next.js. Even applied the theming option in here because we have theming. So you can have one main theme and a child theme, which inherits from the parent theme. So you can just change colors. That's why it's blue, because I had to take a look if I created the child theme that it can inherit everything except the background. So it's a major difference between what you can do in a year. So it has been a long journey, but the main advice I want to give to you is that an impossibility is just a possibility you do not know yet. So if you don't know it, just do it.